Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here today. It is both a privilege and a daunting task to stand before you and tackle a question that has preoccupied human minds for millennia, the question of God. Not merely whether God exists, but why we think about God at all, why we yearn for such an entity, and why, despite the absence of definitive proof, the idea persists across cultures and ages. This is no trivial matter. It strikes at the very core of human cognition, morality, and meaning-making. And yet, it is precisely this tension between curiosity and uncertainty that makes the exploration so fascinating, so vital. I invite you, as we begin, to suspend judgment and allow the question itself to provoke thought, reflection, and perhaps a little discomfort. We are gathered to ponder one of the oldest, most profound, and often most contentious questions humanity has asked: why God and why not God? This formulation may seem deceptively simple, but within it lies an entire universe of inquiry. It invites us to examine not only theology and metaphysics, but also psychology, anthropology, and evolutionary biology. Why have humans across time and space been so compelled to believe in supernatural agents? And conversely, why have some minds resisted that impulse, seeking instead explanations grounded in reason, evidence, and observable phenomena? To address these questions, we must approach them from multiple angles, recognizing that no single discipline holds the monopoly on truth. Now, before anyone gets nervous, I should clarify, I am not here to settle this debate once and for all. That would be an act of hubris, and one that philosophy and science alike caution us against. The question of God is too vast, too entwined with human experience for any single lecture or indeed any single human mind to resolve. Rather, my aim is to guide you through a careful, deliberate examination of the underlying factors that give rise to belief and skepticism alike. By understanding these mechanisms, we gain insight not only into the nature of the divine, if such exists, but also into the architecture of our own minds. Humans are, by nature, pattern-seeking creatures. We are equipped with brains that evolved to detect agency, causation, and intention in the world around us. This tendency, known in cognitive science as hyperactive agency detection, explains why we often attribute unexplained phenomena to conscious agents, ghosts, spirits, gods, rather than randomness or impersonal forces. Such attributions may have conferred survival advantages in our ancestral environments, alerting us to predators or social rivals. But in the modern context, these cognitive habits manifest as religious belief, spiritual intuition, and at times, profound existential awe. Understanding this mechanism helps us see that belief is not merely a matter of indoctrination or whim, but a deeply ingrained feature of the human mind. Yet, belief in God is not reducible to mere cognitive predisposition. Humans are meaning makers. We do not simply observe events, we interpret them. Life is unpredictable, painful, and often bewildering. Believing in a higher power offers narratives that order chaos, confer purpose, and provide moral guidance. Religion, in this sense, can be understood as a cultural technology. A set of memes, as I have termed them, that propagate because they offer practical advantages to individuals and societies. They help us survive adversity, cooperate in large groups, and regulate behavior through shared norms. In this framework, God is both an invention of the mind and a social instrument, serving cognitive, emotional, and cultural functions simultaneously. Conversely, the question of why not God challenges us to apply reason and evidence to our intuitions. Skepticism emerges from our capacity to reflect critically on inherited beliefs, to demand coherence and empirical support for extraordinary claims. The absence of consistent, verifiable evidence for a universal deity raises important questions about the nature and necessity of such beliefs. Moreover, the diversity of gods across human societies suggests that these beings are shaped more by cultural needs than by objective reality. Thus, exploring skepticism is not merely the rejection of faith. It is the exercise of the very cognitive faculties that enabled belief in the first place: curiosity, discernment, and reflective judgment. Finally, as we embark on this intellectual journey together, I ask you to embrace both clarity and humility. We will traverse evolution, psychology, cultural history, and philosophy, examining the origins, purposes, and consequences of belief and non-belief. We may not emerge with definitive answers, but we can gain something equally valuable: insight into ourselves, our minds, and our societies. If by the end of our exploration, we are able to recognize the mechanisms that shape our thinking, the forces that influence our morality, and the narratives that guide our lives, then we will have achieved a measure of understanding and perhaps a touch of wisdom worthy of the question itself. Let us begin with the question, why God? On the surface, it seems simple. People believe in God because they have reasons, experiences, or traditions that lead them to such belief. But if we dig deeper, we realize that the question is not just about individual belief. It is about a universal feature of the human mind. Why are so many minds across cultures, epochs, and environments drawn toward the concept of supernatural agents? What cognitive tendencies make us susceptible to these ideas? It turns out the answer is embedded in the very architecture of our brains, which evolved not to discern truth in some abstract philosophical sense, but to help us survive, reproduce, and navigate complex social environments. Humans are natural pattern seekers. Our minds are exquisitely attuned to noticing correlations and inferring causes, even where none exist. Evolution has equipped us with brains that are extremely sensitive to the slightest cues of agency. If a rustle in the grass signals a predator, noticing it could mean life or death. Failing to detect a hidden threat is more costly than mistakenly attributing a harmless rustle to a predator. Consequently, our cognitive systems err on the side of over-detection. We are wired to assume intentionality behind events because this bias over evolutionary time enhanced survival, social coordination, and vigilance in a dangerous world. Imagine, for a moment, a prehistoric human alone in the forest. A branch snaps, leaves shiver, and a sound reaches your ears. Is it the wind, a harmless animal, or a predator lying in wait? Most adaptive minds lean toward the conclusion that some agent is present. This instinct for hyperactive agency detection is what cognitive scientists describe when they talk about our tendency to see intentionality everywhere. Over centuries, as humans formed societies, these tendencies extended beyond immediate survival concerns to beliefs about invisible agents, spirits, ancestors, gods who could monitor behavior, intervene in events, and influence outcomes. Believing in such agents was not merely a byproduct of imagination. It was profoundly adaptive. Societies whose members assumed they were observed by higher powers were more likely to develop moral norms, cooperate, and enforce rules. Individuals gain psychological benefits, a sense of protection, guidance, and accountability. In this way, supernatural belief became entwined with both survival strategies and social cohesion. From a Darwinian perspective, religious ideas can be seen as cultural adaptations, ideas that propagate because they serve the dual purpose of enhancing group fitness and satisfying deep cognitive inclinations. But hyperactive agency detection alone does not account for the enduring power of gods and spirits. Humans crave meaning. Life is often chaotic, unpredictable, and full of suffering. We seek explanations not only to survive, but to make sense of our experiences, to structure our lives, and to find moral orientation. A God who understands it all, who can punish and reward, who gives order to randomness, offers a compelling narrative that organizes existence into a coherent story. This narrative transforms confusion into comprehension, uncertainty into purpose, and isolation into a connection with something greater than ourselves. In this sense, God is not merely a theological proposition or a metaphysical hypothesis. God is a cultural tool, a kind of intellectual technology that humans have developed to navigate the complexity of existence. In my terminology, God is a mem, a unit of cultural transmission that propagates because it is effective at achieving particular ends. These ends include maintaining social cohesion, motivating ethical behavior, and providing psychological comfort. By examining God in this light, we can appreciate that religious belief is not just about truth claims, it is about survival, both personal and communal, and about the ways our minds shape and are shaped by culture. Understanding the origins of why God gives us a framework to analyze not only belief itself, but the mechanisms that sustain it across generations. Belief in God emerges from the intersection of cognitive predisposition, evolutionary pressures, and cultural reinforcement. It is an artifact of our species' history, a product of minds designed to detect agency, coupled with societies designed to propagate norms. This perspective does not negate the significance or depth of religious experience. It explains why such experiences are almost universal. By tracing belief back to its roots, we can begin to see God not only as a figure in the sky, but as a mirror reflecting the inner workings of our remarkable human minds. Now, let us turn to the other side of the equation. The question of why not God? This perspective is often approached with skepticism, not as a reaction of cynicism, but as an exercise in intellectual rigor. Skeptics and atheists are motivated less by emotion than by an insistence on reason, evidence, and coherence. They ask, if there is a supreme, all-powerful, all-knowing being, why should we accept its existence without compelling evidence? Scientific inquiry is relentless in its demand that claims correspond to observable phenomena and logical consistency. To question God is not to deny the human desire for meaning. It is to insist that belief be accountable to reason. One of the first observations that emerge from a skeptical perspective is the remarkable diversity of gods and religious systems throughout history. Anthropologists have cataloged thousands of deities, each reflecting the social, ecological, and political needs of its culture. From the sky gods of Mesopotamia to the pantheons of ancient India, from ancestor spirits in Africa to abstract monotheism in the Middle East, no single conception of God dominates. This multiplicity suggests that gods are not universal, objective facts waiting to be discovered, but rather cultural artifacts shaped to meet the specific circumstances of human societies. If God were a universal, objective reality, when one might expect greater consistency across human civilizations. Instead, we observe a rich tapestry of beliefs, often mutually incompatible, yet each internally coherent within its cultural context. Some cultures envision gods as loving, some as vengeful, some as personal, others as abstract forces. The variability itself is significant. It indicates that divine concepts evolve alongside human communities, responding to environmental pressures, social norms, and collective psychological needs. From this perspective, gods appear less like immutable truths and more like adaptive tools in the cultural toolbox. Yet, this recognition of variability does not automatically dismiss the possibility of spirituality or moral experience. Humans retain a natural capacity for awe, wonder, and reverence that can be directed toward anything: nature, art, science, or human relationships. Skepticism toward God is not an injunction against experiencing these emotions. It is a call to examine them critically, to seek sources of meaning that do not rely solely on unverified supernatural claims. In other words, the challenge is not to extinguish the light of wonder, but to illuminate it with reason. The skeptical stance also highlights an important moral dimension. Ethical life does not require the existence of a divine overseer. Humans evolved social instincts, empathy, fairness, cooperation, that form the foundations of moral behavior, while religion often codifies these behaviors into rules and rituals. Morality itself can be grounded in understanding, compassion, and rational reflection. By exploring the why not question, we are encouraged to construct ethical frameworks that are flexible, universal, and accountable, rather than dependent on fear of punishment or hope for reward. Moreover, skepticism teaches us to embrace uncertainty and to value inquiry as an end in itself. Questioning God forces us to confront the unknown, to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge, and to approach mysteries with curiosity rather than dogma. In this sense, doubt is not weakness. It is a cognitive strength, a tool for navigating complex realities without succumbing to illusion or authority. It encourages a life lived deliberately, where decisions and beliefs are grounded in evidence, reflection, and ethical consideration. Finally, understanding why not God enriches our comprehension of the human mind and society. It reveals the interplay between cognition, culture, and morality, showing how beliefs emerge, evolve, and sometimes persist without objective grounding. By studying skepticism, we gain insight not only into the limits of supernatural claims, but also into the mechanisms by which humans create meaning and community. In this light, atheism or agnosticism is not simply a rejection. It is an invitation to engage deeply with life, to cultivate reason, compassion, and wisdom, and to navigate existence with both curiosity and integrity. Now, here is where my work in philosophy of mind and cognitive science becomes particularly relevant. For centuries, God has often been invoked as the ultimate explanation, the mover behind all motion, the cause behind all causes, the answer to the question of why anything exists at all. This explanatory role is profound and psychologically compelling. It allows humans to substitute mystery with an authoritative solution. Yet modern science provides alternative lenses for understanding these same questions. Through careful observation, reasoning, and empirical investigation, we have uncovered mechanisms that account for phenomena once attributed exclusively to the divine. This does not necessarily negate God for everyone, but it challenges the assumption that the supernatural is required to explain existence. Cosmology, for instance, offers breathtaking insights into the origins and evolution of the universe. Through the study of cosmic background, radiation, stellar formation, and galactic dynamics, we now understand that the universe began in a hot, dense state roughly 13 billion years ago and has been expanding and evolving ever since. The formation of stars, planets, and chemical elements follows natural laws, revealing processes that are both comprehensible and inspiring. Where once we might have pointed to God as the first mover, we can now trace a chain of causation and transformation that begins with physical processes and extends to the emergence of the cosmos as we know it. Evolutionary biology complements this by showing how complex life emerges from simple beginnings through natural selection. From single-celled organisms to the diversity of plants, animals, and humans, the process of gradual adaptation over vast timescales explains the intricate forms we observe today. Traits that once might have been seen as divinely designed, eyes, wings, consciousness, can instead be understood as the outcome of iterative variation, selection, and inheritance. This does not diminish the wonder of life. On the contrary, it deepens our appreciation for the elegance and resilience of natural processes, demonstrating that intricate complexity need not rely on intentional creation. Neuroscience and psychology provide yet another layer of understanding, revealing why we feel awe, fear, moral obligation, and the impulse to believe. Our brains are finely tuned to social cognition, pattern recognition, and emotional responses. Religious and spiritual experiences can be mapped onto neural mechanisms that evolve to support cooperation, empathy, and learning. Moral intuitions, too, arise from a combination of evolutionary pressures, cultural norms, and cognitive architecture. Understanding these mechanisms illuminates why humans are predisposed to perceive agents, to search for meaning, and to experience transcendent feelings, even in the absence of a supernatural being. Taken together, these scientific insights shift the locus of mystery from external, supernatural forces to the internal workings of nature and mind. Instead of asking, why God? We might ask, how does this astonishingly complex universe arise naturally? Or why do we, as conscious beings, perceive meaning, morality, and purpose? These questions do not eliminate wonder. They redirect it toward phenomena that can be observed, analyzed, and reflected upon. Science, in this sense, invites a form of reverence rooted in understanding, curiosity, and appreciation for the processes that gave rise to everything we see and experience. Philosophy enters here as a companion to science, helping us navigate conceptual challenges and interpret empirical findings, while science answers how questions. Philosophy tackles the why questions, the questions about significance, knowledge, and value, by integrating philosophical reasoning with scientific discoveries. We can frame profound questions about existence, consciousness, and morality in ways that are both intellectually rigorous and deeply meaningful. Philosophy encourages reflection, skepticism, and dialogue, tools that prevent dogmatic adherence to simplistic explanations, whether theistic or materialistic. Ultimately, bridging science and philosophy teaches us humility, curiosity, and adaptability. It reminds us that answers are provisional, that new evidence may revise old beliefs, and that wonder can coexist with understanding. By examining the natural world and the human mind with both rigor and imagination, we cultivate a more nuanced perspective, one that honors mystery without without surrendering to it, that values evidence without dismissing awe, and that positions humanity as both participant in and observer of a vast, interconnected cosmos. Belief in God has historically played a profound role in shaping moral behavior. Across cultures, religions have provided codes, commandments, and narratives designed to guide individuals toward cooperation, fairness, and social cohesion. For many, these moral frameworks offer clarity, authority, and accountability, linking actions to cosmic consequences. However, a critical insight from both evolutionary psychology and philosophy is that morality does not inherently require the existence of God. Human beings possess the cognitive machinery to develop ethical norms independent of supernatural oversight, rooted instead in our social nature and shared vulnerability. Our capacity for empathy is a cornerstone of morality, emerging naturally from evolutionary pressures, favoring cooperation and mutual support. Humans are attuned to the suffering of others, capable of imagining their perspectives and responding with care. Fairness and reciprocity evolved as adaptive strategies, promoting group cohesion and individual survival. Justice, too, arises from a balance between personal interest and communal well-being. These moral instincts are universal, predating organized religion, and they provide a foundation upon which ethical behavior can be built regardless of belief in God or adherence to dogma. Religion, of course, can amplify these tendencies, reinforcing moral norms through ritual, storytelling, and social enforcement. Shared beliefs and sacred narratives help maintain cooperative behavior and discourage harmful actions within communities. Yet, religion can also distort morality. Rules may be rigid, exclusionary, or punitive, and adherence to divine authority can justify cruelty, oppression, or the suppression of critical thinking. Understanding morality as a natural phenomenon allows us to appreciate the benefits of religious frameworks, while remaining alert to their potential misuse or overreach. At the same time, atheism or skepticism does not imply a morality or moral deficiency. On the contrary, ethical systems grounded in reason, empathy, and reflection can be exceptionally robust. Secular philosophies encourage us to consider the consequences of our actions, to weigh the well-being of others, and to act responsibly in an interconnected world. By focusing on human capacities for understanding and compassion, we can cultivate moral behavior that is flexible, context-sensitive, and universally applicable rather than constrained by specific dogmatic rules or theological assumptions. So whether one believes in God, is uncertain, or rejects the idea entirely, the central question becomes not what one believes, but how one acts on those beliefs. Moral integrity requires translating cognitive and emotional capacities into practical decisions, ethical conduct, and constructive social engagement. The content of belief is important, but its consequences, how it shapes daily choices, relationships, and responsibilities are what ultimately define its moral significance. By examining this, we can separate belief from action and focus on cultivating behavior that benefits both the self and the community. Moreover, understanding the natural roots of morality encourages dialogue across religious and non-religious communities. Recognizing shared ethical instincts allows us to build consensus on core values like fairness, cooperation, and compassion, even in the absence of shared theological assumptions. It highlights that moral principles are not the exclusive domain of religious thought. They are emergent features of human nature, accessible through reason reflection and empathy. This realization fosters tolerance, collaboration, and a focus on evidence-based ethical decision-making. Finally, exploring moral and social implications in this way underscores the importance of living deliberately. Ethics is not handed down from the heavens. It is discovered, negotiated, and enacted through human experience. Whether inspired by divine command, cultural tradition, or secular reasoning, morality is a human project. By understanding its evolutionary, cognitive, and social foundations, we can cultivate a moral life that is thoughtful, compassionate, and resilient. In doing so, we affirm that human beings are capable of ethical greatness, regardless of whether their framework is theistic, agnostic, or atheistic. Perhaps the most profound lesson we can draw from both belief and skepticism is that uncertainty is not a flaw in human cognition. It is, in many ways, a feature. Our minds evolved to navigate a complex and unpredictable world, to detect patterns, infer causes, and predict outcomes, but not to know everything. Life is full of ambiguity that challenges our assumptions and pushes the boundaries of understanding. The recognition of uncertainty is not a mark of weakness. It is a sign of cognitive sophistication. By acknowledging what we do not know, we cultivate intellectual humility, a readiness to revise our beliefs in light of new evidence, and an openness to perspectives beyond our own. Belief in God often offers a kind of certainty that is psychologically comforting. When the world is unpredictable, threatening, or incomprehensible, invoking a higher power provides reassurance and a narrative framework in which events have meaning. It allows humans to feel connected to something larger than themselves, to believe that life is purposeful and that ethical behavior will be rewarded. This certainty can be stabilizing, providing motivation, hope, and structure in an otherwise chaotic environment. Yet it can also obscure critical thinking, discourage inquiry, and foster dogmatic adherence to inherited ideas rather than evidence or reflection. Skepticism, by contrast, emphasizes inquiry over certainty. The skeptic approaches questions of existence, morality, and meaning with curiosity, demanding evidence, and reasoning critically about claims. This approach can be unsettling because it often leaves answers open-ended, provisional, and contingent. But therein lies its strength. Skepticism fosters resilience in the face of ambiguity, encourages continuous learning, and cultivates a mindset willing to revise opinions when confronted with new data. In this way, skepticism is not a denial of awe or wonder. It is a disciplined engagement with the mysteries of life. Both belief and skepticism are human responses to the mysteries that surround us. Our brains, magnificent as they are also limited. We cannot fully comprehend infinity, the origins of the cosmos, or the emergence of consciousness from matter. Recognizing these cognitive boundaries can be liberating rather than discouraging. Instead of striving for ultimate certainty, we can redirect our energy toward understanding the mechanisms, patterns, and structures that shape the universe and our experience within it. In doing so, we cultivate a humility that enriches both thought and life. Embracing uncertainty also opens space for dialogue and collaboration. When we accept that no one possesses complete knowledge, we are more willing to listen, question, and engage with others' perspectives. This is crucial not only in science and philosophy, but also in moral and social realms. Uncertainty encourages empathy, patience, and critical reflection. It reminds us that disagreements about God, morality, or meaning are not failures of reasoning, but inevitable encounters with the limits of understanding, challenges that invite curiosity rather than fear. Furthermore, living with uncertainty enhances personal growth. It fosters flexibility, creativity, and adaptive thinking. When answers are provisional, we become more willing to experiment with ideas, revise strategies, and explore novel possibilities. Life becomes a dynamic process of inquiry, reflection, and refinement, rather than a rigid adherence to preordained certainties. By treating uncertainty as an opportunity rather than a threat, we transform cognitive vulnerability into a tool for intellectual and moral development. Ultimately, embracing uncertainty allows us to inhabit the human condition fully. We recognize the limits of knowledge while celebrating the capacity for inquiry. We balance awe with understanding, humility with curiosity, and reflection with action. Whether we approach existence through faith, reason, or a combination of both, uncertainty becomes a guiding principle that nurtures wisdom, resilience, and ethical living. By leaning into the unknown, we cultivate minds capable of both comprehension and wonder, and lives marked not by fear, but by thoughtful engagement with the mysteries that define our existence. So, what can we do with all this? How do we take the insights from belief, skepticism, and the study of human cognition and translate them into practical guidance for living? The first step is to question everything, including your own beliefs. Intellectual humility is not weakness, it is a strength. It allows us to recognize that our intuitions, experiences, and inherited assumptions are fallible. By subjecting our own ideas to scrutiny, we sharpen our understanding, avoid self-deception, and open ourselves to new perspectives. The courage to question oneself is the foundation of thoughtful, reflective living. Second, seek explanations rather than mere comfort. The universe is vast, intricate, and often baffling, but it rewards curiosity. When we approach phenomena with a desire to understand, rather than simply to feel reassured, we engage our minds in the most human of pursuits, discovery. Whether through science, philosophy, or reflective observation, seeking explanations trains our reasoning, expands our knowledge, and nurtures a sense of awe grounded in comprehension rather than superstition. Understanding does not diminish wonder, it enriches it. Third, act ethically regardless of whether God exists. Moral action is not contingent on divine oversight. It emerges from our capacity for empathy, reason, and reflection. Compassion, fairness, and justice are principles that transcend theological frameworks. By grounding our ethical behavior in understanding and consideration for others, we create communities and relationships that are resilient, just, and humane. Ethical living is an intentional practice, a choice to translate insight and awareness into concrete actions that improve the world. Fourth, embrace wonder without needing a deity. Humans are wired to experience awe, reverence, and fascination. Natural beauty, human creativity, the intricacies of life and consciousness, these evoke profound feelings that do not require supernatural interpretation. Appreciating the extraordinary within the ordinary cultivates curiosity and delight, reminding us that the universe itself is sufficient to inspire awe. By learning to inhabit a world rich with natural marvels, we find meaning without reliance on external validation from imagined powers. Fifth, recognize the power of dialogue and reflection. Engaging with others who hold different beliefs or no beliefs at all challenges our assumptions, broadens our understanding, and strengthens reasoning skills. Respectful discourse encourages empathy, sharpens argumentation, and helps us refine ethical and philosophical perspectives. The ability to listen, question, and synthesize multiple viewpoints fosters intellectual and moral growth and diminishes dogmatic rigidity, allowing society to flourish through shared insight and cooperation. Sixth, cultivate a mindset of continuous learning and adaptation. Life is dynamic, knowledge evolves, and circumstances change. By remaining intellectually flexible, we can revise beliefs in light of new evidence, adjust moral judgments as understanding deepens, and embrace uncertainty as a tool rather than a threat. This adaptive approach to thought and behavior empowers us to navigate a complex and unpredictable world with resilience, creativity, and integrity, combining curiosity with wisdom and action with reflection. Finally, integrate these lessons into everyday living. Question deeply, seek understanding, act ethically, marvel at the world, engage openly with others, and remain adaptable. These practices foster a life that is thoughtful, compassionate, and richly textured. They allow us to navigate the mysteries of existence with clarity, purpose, and integrity, whether we approach life from a religious, secular, or agnostic perspective. In doing so, we transform knowledge and reflection into lived wisdom, finding meaning in both the known and the unknown, and cultivating lives that are as intellectually rigorous as they are morally attuned. In the end, the question, why God? And why not God? Is less about settling an abstract debate than it is about understanding ourselves. It is about turning the lens inward, exploring the cognitive, emotional, and cultural processes that shape belief and skepticism alike, by reflecting on why humans are drawn to divine concepts or to rational doubt. We gain insight into our desires, our fears, and our intellectual habits. This question, far from being merely theological or philosophical, is a mirror that reveals the structure of the human mind, the ways we interpret the world, and the strategies we employ to navigate uncertainty and meaning. Belief in God reflects our enduring search for purpose, for guidance, and for comfort in the face of unpredictability and suffering. It arises from deeply ingrained cognitive tendencies, from our need to detect agents and patterns, and from our longing for moral and existential order. These impulses are neither trivial nor irrational. They are part of what it means to be human. Conversely, skepticism reflects our desire for evidence, clarity, and intellectual honesty. Skeptical inquiry challenges assumptions, encourages reflection, and fosters the intellectual discipline necessary for understanding a complex world. Both approaches illuminate complementary aspects of our nature. By examining these questions seriously, we cultivate clarity about how we think and why we act as we do. We learn to recognize the influence of inherited beliefs, social pressures, and cognitive biases on our choices and attitudes. This understanding is not merely theoretical, it has practical consequences for how we live and interact with others. It teaches us to navigate moral dilemmas, interpersonal conflicts, and existential uncertainties with greater insight, empathy, and deliberation, equipping us to engage responsibly and thoughtfully with the challenges of human life. So, whatever your stance, believer, skeptic, or somewhere in between, I encourage you to ask these questions of yourself with honesty and courage. Are the beliefs you hold helping you live wisely, act ethically, and cultivate understanding? Are they fostering insight rather than complacency, compassion rather than rigidity? And are you willing to revise those beliefs when confronted with new evidence, reasoned argument, or moral reflection? These questions are not rhetorical. They are practical tools for aligning thought, intention, and action in a coherent and meaningful way. It is also vital to consider the ethical dimension of belief. Whether one's framework is religious, secular, or somewhere in between, acting with empathy, integrity, and responsibility is what ultimately defines moral worth. A belief system, no matter how elaborate, inspiring, or comforting, cannot substitute for deliberate ethical conduct. By connecting reflection to action, inquiry to compassion, and curiosity to responsibility, we ensure that our intellectual and moral lives are mutually reinforcing rather than isolated or contradictory. If the answer to these questions about reflection, revision, and ethical conduct is yes, then you are on a path toward a meaningful, thoughtful, and humane life. Such a life does not require certainty, nor does it demand conformity to dogma. It requires mindfulness, self-awareness, and the courage to engage deeply with both mystery and evidence. It requires balancing wonder with reason, humility with confidence, and questioning with compassion. In this way, the exploration of God and skepticism becomes more than abstract inquiry. It becomes a practical framework for living well. Ladies and gentlemen, in the mystery, majesty, and sometimes overwhelming complexity of existence, that may be the most important truth of all. Whether through the lens of faith, doubt, or a careful combination of both, the pursuit of understanding, ethical action, and reflective living is what gives life its deepest significance. By engaging with these questions thoughtfully, we honor our cognitive capacities, our moral instincts, and our shared humanity, cultivating lives that are not only intelligible, but rich with meaning, purpose, and wonder.